think the question of turnover of cafes, I think, is maybe not the right question. I think it's more about who's successful and who's spinning the wheels. And that's the same, not just in coffee, that's any business. Right? There's so many businesses, and you'll have lots of people who are they're turning the wheels. They turn the wheels and they get by and they move forward. I think the more interesting question is who goes from turning their wheels to expanding and significantly growing their business.
Hello, and welcome to episode number 64 of the Rose Bros podcast. Today we are joined by Wes and Jen Farnell, co-founders of 8 Ounce Coffee, an 8-figure specialty coffee equipment business. Started in 2011 as a side gig selling AeroPress and KeepCups to an emerging crowd of specialty coffee baristas and home coffee enthusiasts, 8 Ounce has grown their line of products into what it has become today. Think of 8 Ounce as the suppliers of the hardware that coffee drinkers use to brew their coffee, including everything from home-use pour-overs to commercial latte machines in cafes. 8 Ounce is now the biggest specialty coffee equipment distributor in Canada, selling to almost 4,000 cafes, roasters, hotels, kitchens, and lifestyle stores in Canada and the USA. Operating out of a 20,000 square foot warehouse in Calgary with team members in Montreal and Toronto, 8 Ounce has managed to grow their business even during the COVID-19 pandemic. In addition, in 2018, Canadian Business Magazine ranked 8 Ounce number 40 on the annual Growth 500, a ranking of Canada's fastest growing companies on 5-year revenue growth. We sat down for a smooth cup of coffee and discussed the origins of 8 Ounce, how to make a good cup of coffee, what makes a good cafe, the growing pains of an expanding business, coffee hardware, advice to aspiring entrepreneurs, and a lot more. Also, the Rose Bros podcast will always be free. But you can now support the show by making a single contribution or signing up for a monthly subscription at rosebros.ca/podcast. Any support is much appreciated as the show continues doing its best to entertain you. Enjoy.
This is why we've got a strong marriage. We can sit this close to each other for at least half an hour.
45 minutes, dude.
Yeah. Well, we won't talk too long. Thanks for doing this.
No problem. Thanks for asking us.
How'd you guys meet?
Oh, wow. We met over in England, as you may have noticed from Wes's accent. He's not from here.
Yep.
He's from England, and I was living over there back in 2004. I moved over there. Wes and I we had mutual friends. I was working at a company in Brighton, and Wes had worked at that same company. So there was a leaving party one night that Wes came back for, and that's the night we met.
Yeah. She hated me.
I didn't like him very much.
Instantly.
No, it was not love at first sight at all.
No.
Probably not even for the first year.
Interesting.
But eventually.
Eventually.
Yeah.
I warmed up to you.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I
came around.
And I relaxed myself a little.
Yeah. On all the time.
Yeah.
What is 8 Ounce Coffee for anyone that is listening?
8 Ounce Coffee. Well, first of all, it's a maternity leave project that got wildly out of hand.
That's awesome.
So we import and distribute specialty coffee equipment. So we sell both wholesale and retail. Wholesale is the majority of our business. So if you go into a cafe like Phil and Sebastian or Rosso or Monogram or anywhere like that that's across the country and a lot into the US as well, we probably have provided them with their retail equipment that they're selling on their shelves. So if you want to go in there and buy like a kettle, a brewer, anything like that, that's probably something that we've supplied to them. And behind the bar, and they're using the milk pitchers and the tampers. Those are things that we provide as well. Then also part of our business is direct to consumer. So we have our retail channel that we sell direct to people all across the world of specialty coffee equipment to use at home.
Yeah. Just to layer something on that, you ask what 8 Ounce is it's not just bringing in any equipment that we find. Because we are first and foremost coffee geeks, like we love coffee. We love the whole gastronomic area, and coffee just happens to be part of that. We don't just want to bring in anything because we could sell it. We search hard, look really hard, and spend a lot of time finding the right products. And when we do find products that we think might be right, or we're approached with products now, which has been a nice change over the years that people come to us now, is that we have an evaluation and a testing process, and it has to be something that we would use ourselves. or the best of an example of something. And so there might be certain times that gets veered from when it's part of a collection we might bring in. It might not be normally something that we have, but our primary goal is to make sure that the things we bring in are things that we would want to use and use ourselves. I think that I hope that keeps us honest and keeps us in touch with where we originally started. Let's just focus on who we are rather than, of course we look outwards, but not too much, right?
Would a good analogy be that you guys are more into the hardware of the coffee business rather than software?
Yeah, for sure.
Software being roasted coffee beans.
Yeah. Yep, absolutely. And I think our roots as well are in barista competition and that kind of level of small, independently owned, owner-operated cafes where people obsess over every detail of something. So that's like we're kind of providing them with those items that they love. People get really excited about the things that we carry, and we try and make sure we've always got the latest, coolest stuff that everyone's talking about. Because that's really, that's who we are, and that's our community that we're part of. Did you pick coffee hardware instead of whole roasted coffee beans, for instance, for a reason? What was the rationale behind that decision?
I think lots of people do coffee. Like, you can get a lot of coffee everywhere. It was also business. I mean, frankly, we're also business people, and it was a much bigger opportunity that we saw the hole in the market here for coffee equipment, I think it'd be fair to say.
There's that whole story about Levi Strauss selling jeans to the miners instead of getting into mining himself, right? And there's a lot more opportunity there.
Servicing the gold rush.
It's the same sort of thing, And I think I think you would have been really happy roasting coffee or opening a cafe, or like that's what you really wanted to do. But I saw an opportunity to bring in this equipment that we'd seen when we were going around the cafes of London before we moved over. And there was things that you would get super excited about that you couldn't find here, like Porlex grinders and Harrier V60s, and you just didn't see them anywhere here.
Or there was, when we were talking to cafe owners, and we had some connections where we hung out at cafes and we liked to know what's going on, right?
Yeah.
And it was obvious that it was a struggle. It wasn't an easy process to get things in, and some people were managing, but it was expensive and it was logistically difficult, more challenging. Most people that we spoke to really wanted these things, but couldn't get them. And the only thing that was really available well and still is on the market was commercial equipment. And lots of people carrying commercial equipment, but no one really saw the opportunity, what we focused on. And, we've seen that from other countries we've been to, not just the UK and specifically London, but all these things were available and popular, and it was really difficult to get them firstly in Canada. And then if you could get them, you were tied to, okay, I want these 10 different retail items on my shelves, but I've got to go to each company individually and buy a minimum and then bring that in. And most cafes just can't do that. It's not feasible. It's too expensive. You just can't do it. And so, that was another sort of strand to what we wanted to achieve, was to make it much easier for people to do business and cafes to be successful. And that sort of tied into my scratching that itch of supporting and being a closer part of cafes, because, I want cafes to be successful. I love going to cafes. I don't know about you, but when we go to other countries, our tour pattern is pretty much dictated by where the really good cafes and restaurants are. And that dictates how we move around a city. And so, to be able to be a part of helping retail become a real successful line of income for those cafes was really important to us.
Yeah.
Did you guys have to take on a bunch of inventory when you got going? Was it a big investment?
It started off so small.
Because you're in the hardware business.
It was not really a big investment at all. I mean, it's not like we had a ton of money that we put into this. We didn't have any money back then. We just moved from another country and had nothing. And we bought a case of AeroPress. Maybe a case
Shout out to AeroPress. I love the AeroPress.
Yeah.
Seriously.
Literally, some KeepCups.
And KeepCup was just starting to kind of expand outside of their territories and start to deal with distributors. So we were just really lucky to kind of strike up a relationship with them. And no one could go to KeepCup now and say, can I be distributor of a country? Send me 3 boxes. We were just really fortunate from that point of view. And it was very small. And yes, we'd get a case of something, sell it, buy 2 cases of something, sell it, buy 4 cases.
Pretty straightforward. It wasn't anything that was groundbreaking, but I think what was we were just trying to find the right products and trying to understand what people wanted and where the demand was in the market. And so I think KeepCup, AeroPress, and then Paulex we knew was massively popular. For anyone who doesn't know Paulex is it's the sort of standard specialty grinder before you had all of the Commandantes and those higher price. This was sort of amazing travel grinder. It's still around. It's still a great grinder.
Yeah,
but
fits inside an AeroPress.
Yeah,
too.
Fits inside an AeroPress, that was complementary as well. And bearing in mind, this was just retail to start with, right?
Yeah.
So it was it was entirely retail, and we kept our stock in our 200 square foot basement. It started growing and growing, and
it was we'd get an alert on our phones, I guess, and be like, oh, the web order just came in, gotta stop what we're doing, find a cardboard box, pack it up, drive over to Canada Post, stand in line, ship it out, and try and make it look like we were like a real company.
Yep.
And it just, it started snowballing quite quickly.
How were you guys paying the bills at the time? Were you living on savings?
Well, we did have, I guess we brought a little bit of money over. We didn't have a load because a lot had been taken up in the move, and we'd taken
4 months, where we weren't working before because I was on maternity leave. And you took a nice package from Barclays when they were restructuring.
Yeah.
I mean, it was a few years after the crash of 2008, but they were still kind of suffering from that.
Yeah. We didn't have a lot. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I wanted to be a barista for a while. That's what I wanted to be. So I went to a few different companies and just wanted to be a barista. One company I approached, they had some challenges that they needed support with, which suited some of my experience. So apart from working in banking, I've also worked for Starbucks. I used to open troubleshoot stores for them. So that was a real good grounding in coffee as well. And so there was some opportunity to help that company get to where they needed to be at the time. And so I said I'd work for them for a year, and while we were getting everything sorted out. And so Jen would be at home with Morgan working on the site, and then I would be in the business and I'd be working, and then I'd come home and then it'd be packing stuff and getting it in the car and taking it over to the post office and making sure I didn't get a ticket while I was parked outside while I was running in, and building up better relationships every day so the people in the post office would come out and help me bring everything in and scan it all at once. Yeah, it was, we were living off basically
my maternity pay,
and some income I was getting from doing that.
Yeah. And we were really lucky too, because as the business started to pick up, they were really flexible with you, letting you work. You know, you went from 5 days a week to 4 days a week to 3 days a week. So it wasn't like one day we had to say, okay, let's make the job, quit the job and start this full time. We were really able to ease you into being full time and helping me out, because boy, I needed it by the time you came over full time.
And that was always the challenge, was finding a tipping point. Our initial goal for 8 Outs was, what was it?
$200 a month in revenue.
That's awesome.
And so
that was our
That's
target.
what it was.
Sure.
It was a little side thing for us doing for fun.
And then it came through to when I was going to step away from what I was doing. Well, we had this daily amount which we knew we had to hit every day to cover our bills and to allow the business to grow. And so the goal every day was to just hit that amount.
Pay for the day.
Pay for the day, and that was it. And everything else above that was cream. You know, so it was.
That's awesome.
So, and that's what we really did for 3.5 years, maybe. So we worked from home for 3.5 years, and we had one person pretty much constantly working out of our place.
Just a friend of ours that was a barista who had left his job and was moving to Vancouver, but had a couple of months with nothing to do, so we had him packing boxes.
Yeah. Cool. I don't know, at that peak, we got to probably about 700-foot storage lockers.
Yeah, we had storage lockers.
And so we'd be getting these orders, driving out to pick everything up and going to the different ones to pick everything, then driving back and then
packing up.
Shit, I forgot something and then go back out again.
That's awesome.
And then at 4:00 every day, a UPS truck would back up onto our townhouse driveway.
And then we're getting bigger and bigger.
The neighbors would be looking like, what the heck is going on out there? getting better and better.
Yeah,
bigger,
so
bigger.
I think it became a real issue when the one UPS truck reversed and went into our
into the
bay
side of
windows.
the townhouse.
Big, so we're like, okay, so
Like, I think we need to get a warehouse.
yeah.
Did you guys always want to be entrepreneurs? Was that the plan?
I've kind of always been an entrepreneur, and I think
I always wanted to be.
Okay.
Yeah, we're both that way. We're both kind of, we look for opportunities and we think about how to do things, and we always talk about, well, if we were doing this, how would we do it? And if we were doing that, how would we do it? The big difference that we have is we always say Wes is the jazz hands and I'm the spreadsheet. So Wes is the one who goes out and builds relationships with suppliers and meets people and goes to trade shows and talks to everybody, and everybody knows him, and they go out for drinks, and he finds products, and he deals with customers and all that. And I like to be more behind the scenes doing, forecasting and strategy and figuring out spreadsheets and figuring out ways to shave some cost of goods and that kind of thing. That's my jam. So we work perfectly together in that respect, because we don't really
tread on
cross
each other's
over.
feet.
Yeah.
And where we do cross over, it's strategy and the things that we'll sit down and formulate what the next steps are and what we want to do. I think a lot of couples can't work together.
Yes.
And we're fortunate that we don't do the same things.
Yeah.
But we have enough experience in each other's areas to be able to support.
Yeah.
But we don't do the same things, which is really helpful.
How stressful was it when you left your banking job and you had a newborn and you moved over to Canada?
Zero. I had come to
I hated the job.
hate it. I honestly think one of the things that inspires me to keep going in the business
Just thinking about your old job.
is not working for anyone else. Specifically people who, there's a lot of people I love there, but generally working corporate, there's a lot of politics, right?
Oh yeah.
And a lot of bullshit, to put it bluntly.
Yes.
And I just didn't want to, I didn't want to do it.
For sure.
It's that inspiration to never have to work for anyone else again.
That's totally true.
That's part of the entrepreneurial spirit, I think, for everyone.
So that fear.
But then Jen was successful before that, right? So she had a business in Calgary.
I had a few IT companies before I moved to England that I had here in Calgary that I sold. And so when I moved to England, it was a bit like, okay, this is a fresh start. I'm going to go work for somebody and see what it's like. So I worked for two different companies. There was a company in Brighton where we met, and I enjoyed that. I was just a web programmer. I didn't have to make any big decisions or manage people, or not too much of that. It was that was nice. I was just doing programming. And then when we moved up to London, I joined their web team initially. And the same sort of thing. I had to mildly manage some people, but mostly it was just putting my head down and writing code.
And then walking away at the end of the day.
Walking away at the end of the day, which was fun. And then I shifted teams while I was at BBC. I completely did a 180 and moved over to the BBC Good Food team and did a lot of the editorial work and worked with celebrity chefs and TV shows and, where they were writing recipes, and so we managed all of their website from that point of view. So that was really fun and really exciting. But by the time I left, things were changing. There's budget cuts. There's a new CEO. People were leaving.
It's the same thing that happens in any corporate.
It's always like
just
that.
cycles.
It's just the way it is. Yeah. Similar with Rose Bros. I don't really know where it's headed, but all I know is that I don't want to work for someone anymore.
Yeah. It's true, right? Definitely this part, I think definitely a driving part of an entrepreneur, just like you are, right, is like, I've tried these other things. I've tried working for people, and I think I can make better decisions and do things better.
100%.
But there is a bit of that in every I think everyone who owns their own business.
Yeah.
Whether they do or not, that's for other people to decide. Whether they have to make better
making up
decisions.
money too,
But,
definitely. Anyone who knows me knows I do not want to be told what to do. Don't tell me what to do.
Yeah.
And I have to be an entrepreneur because that's the only way that works.
Fortunately, you guys have done pretty well and it's panned out, but it can be stressful too. There's financial instability with that route also.
I think the biggest stressful part is, firstly, in knowing that you've got some growth and we've built pretty good foundations, so we don't worry too much about that. And we're very tied into what we do and the figures and everything, but we have some area of comfort there. But the stressful things are growing a company successfully and getting really good structure in place. And I think, which, I think any entrepreneur wants to do, is to be able to step further away from the business and work definitely more on the business than in the business.
For sure.
And that can be stressful, how to do that best and maintain and continually grow the business.
Yeah.
And I think that's something that we're still working on. It's where we get better, and we go to other friends who are entrepreneurs for advice and support as well.
Yeah.
Because, no one knows everything, right?
Yeah.
But that's the people part is my favorite part of the business, but also provides the most stress.
Yes.
I think that's where my stress comes from, not really anywhere else.
How big a staff is 8 ounce now?
We have 30 people.
Around 30.
Yeah. I'm sure it carries its stresses.
Yeah.
It does.
We have an awesome team of people. I think we've gotten a lot better at hiring in the last few years. So I think we've made a lot less mistakes, and we have a lot of really great people now. There's always things going on.
Always.
That's never going to change.
When you get those halcyon weeks of everything is perfect, you just grab onto them because you know that at some point soon there'll be something else that you've got to react to. But again, we have a great team of people here. We need more people.
Yeah.
It'd be worth probably touching on talking about like genericism to specialism that happens when your business grows, which has been which is always a challenge. Stress-wise, it's always based around the people, I would say. And I think that it's because we give a shit about them. And I think that's any entrepreneur who doesn't get stressed about the people probably doesn't care enough about their people. Because everyone wants the best, or should want the best for their employees, right? And
there's no right answer sometimes.
Yeah.
And so it's really hard to make certain decisions. But you've got to have to go back to those values and what you want. Is it the best for both the individuals and the business? And there's balance there that's got to be struck. And that can be stressful.
How did you guys deal with the growing pains as you've gotten bigger?
A lot of the worst of it is over, I think. This is actually our 10th year in business, which seems crazy, but I'd say maybe 4 or 5 years ago, maybe 6 years ago, we were really struggling like a lot of companies do when they're growing with cash flow, because, you're not getting paid for something until maybe 30 days after you've sold it, and you've got to pay for things right away. In our case, we're paying for something in Japan, have to pay upfront for it, then it gets manufactured, then it gets put on a boat, then it comes over. We're out of pocket this entire time. Then we sell it to somebody when it finally arrives, and then they have 30-day terms. So, but you know that your business is growing, so you know you can't order that much again next time. You've got to order twice as much next time, but you still haven't been paid for it. So that's kind of the toughest part of growing, is being like, we're doing so well. Look at these figures. Look at these growth numbers. Look at this revenue. Why do we have no money?
What's wrong? What are we doing wrong? We have conversations. If we're doing something wrong, what is it?
Yes.
Why are we struggling? But I think like we've gotten through a lot of that. We're able to predict a bit better now. We are getting better at cash flow management, and we also have really strong relationships with our bank, which is ATB, and I think that's so important because we've got a huge safety net now. So, they've given us a great line of credit, and we had to earn it and we had to build it up, but we've got that safety net. So I no longer lose sleep at night about money.
Yeah, I'm going to digress for a second. There was literally once a year when we would be, there's no other way of putting it, we were shitting it, and it was usually when we were on vacation. It'd be usually the biggest cash crunch we've had, and our vacation would be wrecked for like a week of us stressing out how to move. Again, any entrepreneur will have probably gone through this at some point, right? It's like, how the hell are we going to do this and this at the same time? We don't know. I mean, the amount of times that I'd be jumping onto the bank and just be like, you need to help us out for a few days. You need to do something because this is the only option we have. And we didn't help ourselves early on in the fact that we probably could have got investment, but we never took it.
Okay.
And so
cool.
That's really paid dividends now, because Jen and I entirely
own the company. Because no one tells me what to do.
Yeah.
It's probably a wise decision long term.
I've tried. I mean,
But
no, it is. And actually that's really come to pay dividends.
Yeah.
That we don't.
I'm so glad we never took investors.
And it allows us to be a bit more nimble as well, because we don't have to run this. But of course we consult with our employees and staff, because it's important that everyone understands and is on board and has a contribution. But we can make decisions swiftly.
And we can make good decisions, not just decisions that are going to pay out higher dividends than last year to shareholders. Like, our decisions are not based on that.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we can
really
actually
important.
be based on our values, and which.
What makes good coffee to you guys? Why don't we get into coffee a little bit? Since we are both coffee companies, is it good coffee beans? Is it equipment? Does it matter?
It is so dependent on the individual. I mean, I can tell you what I think makes good coffee. We can be scientific about it if we want to be. You're going to have a certain type of coffee that you like to drink. You're going to have a way that you prepare it. And I think for the general answer to this is, I don't really care what you're drinking as long as you enjoy it. Okay. I don't care how you're making it as long as you enjoy it. If we can facilitate that, that's great. Personally, if you're asking me, I actually didn't like coffee for many years until I sat down in a cafe just off Leicester Square with a friend. They brought in some Coffee Collective, if you know Coffee Collective. And they had this Kenyan there. And every time I drank coffee before that, I had a headache. Like, I would get a headache. And I'm like, I don't like this. This just is not nice. So they made this coffee for me. It was expensive for the time. Not what coffee should be priced, but it was expensive. And it was that moment when I drank it. I thought, this is coffee. This is delicious. It was a Kenyan from Coffee Collective, and it tasted of blueberries. It was blueberry juice, and it was just delicious. And, that's what got me hooked. And so I'm definitely into light roast, because anything else, if it's darker roast, it literally gives me a headache. It gives me a headache. And frankly, a bit like wine, I like to be able to taste the varietal and how it's been roasted, and not necessarily the roast, but the roast has enhanced those flavors. And how to brew it, well, again, it's preference. I brew probably 3 or 4 different ways at home. Sometimes I make espresso, sometimes pour overs, sometimes immersions. It really depends how I feel. And it's one of those things that, if you've dialed correctly, if you've got all the parameters right of coffee, and you've got a coffee bean that you like, be it a dark roast or a light roast or something that's really varietal driven or really roast driven, then, I think if you enjoy it, that's what it comes down to. I mean, I'm going to drink a light roast, and I'm going to want it extracted well.
Yes,
and
that's the key.
That's how I'm going to enjoy it. But the fact of the matter is that 99% of the population thinks that coffee is Tim Hortons or
for sure
an equivalent, which doesn't really have any characteristic apart from maybe those memories of when they were younger, of that smell and that flavor, and you put a buffer of cream and sugar in, and suddenly it's delicious. Yeah. Double is popular for a reason.
Oh, totally. I love it. Yeah.
You put cream and sugar in anything, it's probably going to taste good.
Yeah.
For me personally, definitely lighter roast, extracted well, and just something I enjoy drinking. And just because it's light roast doesn't mean it's going to be delicious, but something that's been sourced really well and processed really well. And I don't really have a preference. I mean, arguably probably drink some African coffees a little more, but I'm not, I'm not going to impose my view of what my coffee should be for someone else, because everyone likes something different.
That's what seems to be the common answer.
Yeah.
See, mine is much more simple than that. I like Kenyan coffee, like it to be juicy and bright, and I like it done in a Hario Kasuya brewer pour over.
Yeah.
Interesting.
That's my favorite. I have never been historically a coffee drinker. I've always been a tea drinker. When Wes first got into coffee in London, when we were going around, I was not really into it. I think I just ordered tea usually when we went into cafes.
I'd like, try this, and delicious.
And the 2010 World Barista Competition was in London, and Wes was heavily involved in that and volunteering with the baristas. Two of your barista buddies that you helped out went on to win Worlds.
Alejandro Mendes and Raul Rodas.
Yeah.
That's cool.
And
I had nothing to do with it.
Yeah.
And that was a fun time. That was my first exposure to specialty coffee, and I got super excited about that. And James Hoffman was doing a Penny University nearby where you could book an appointment and sit down, and he would brew 3 different coffees for you and pair them with 3 different chocolates. And I was probably his most annoying appointment of the day, because did we know him at that point? I can't remember if that was the first time I met him, but I was like, I don't really like coffee. You can serve me whatever you want, but it's going to taste like garbage. And it's being really obnoxious. And then the first sip I took, I kind of went, whoa, what did you put in here? This is actually really good. And it tasted of blueberries. I don't know what it was.
I think you'd put cream and sugar in there.
Yeah.
I definitely did.
I take a lot of cream.
But you did it on the Hario wood neck with the cloth
Melfred.
filter.
Yeah.
Oh yeah? It was fantastic. And then I was probably even more obnoxious because I just was so surprised that it actually tasted good. And it was just one of those life-changing moments. It was exciting. And then I was hooked on the coffee industry after that.
How important is a good grinder?
It's very important when people come into here and they're asking for a new brew method. Maybe they're using a French press and they want to use I want to try pour over. Before I even get into that, I'll ask them what grinder they use.
Really?
Because, it's, the analogy sort of uses, you don't go to the grocer and buy tomatoes and ask them to pre-slice them for you. I mean, you could put them in the fridge and eat them.
For sure.
And they'd taste okay. But they're not going to taste as good. And that's just the same with any produce, right? If when you break those down, when you grind and you just leave it there, you're going to lose flavor. You're going to lose a whole range of different elements from the coffee. And so, if you want to get a good extraction, if you want to have the best chance of getting the best out of your coffee and having consistent coffee as well, then you need a good grinder. You don't need to spend a load on it. It's sort of diminishing returns the more you spend. Right?
Okay.
So, if you're a total geek, you might want to spend $4,500 on a Weber EG1, and have that running on your counter. But for most people, I think there's a sweet spot. And, if you can go from, say, what most people do is they either use a blade grinder at home or they'll get it pre-ground. If you can spend, $50 on a Hario hand grinder, which is sort of like the entry-level grinder, it's going to be better. You're going to get a better output from it. And if you can spend, $200 on a Bratza Encore, or you want something a little bit fancier and you want to go for, maybe $400 on a fellow Ode, you're going to make it more convenient, and you're going to get just a more consistent grind distribution and consequently a more consistent cup of coffee. And so, grinding is exceptionally important. Having a good grinder, or at least having a burr grinder, is really important. It can be manual, it can be electric. Really important. But the other thing I've thrown there as well is to have really good water, right? So that's always a challenge when you're in a place that's got really hard water or really soft water. And so, it's those two things are the things that I'll speak to customers about first. Well, are you getting the best out of what you're doing already? Because if you're going to put money somewhere, maybe it's best to put it here first.
For anyone that is listening, what is the reason why a good grinder helps? The difference in the coarseness of the bean?
So there's a couple of things. So if you think about when you're using a blade grinder, let's use a blade grinder, for example, it doesn't give you any consistency. Also, it's got this little motor underneath which goes really fast.
Yeah.
And gets really hot. And all those things are things you don't want to do to coffee when you're grinding it. You want it to be consistent, not all over the place. You want it to be as even a distribution within like a range, within a delta as you're going to get. You're always going to get fines, you're always going to get boulders in there, but you want as even a distribution as possible in that right delta of grind. And then you don't want loads of heat applied to it, because as soon as you start applying heat to it, you're going to lose a lot of the flavors. And so that's really why you need a good grinder, because you want it to do all the things that a bad grinder doesn't do.
Right.
Burr grinders, they're going to move slower than that. Generally, they're set to go slower. They are designed to give you a more even distribution, and they don't generate anywhere near as much heat as one of those little buzzy grinders. That's really why you want it. I mean, and it doesn't have to be expensive. I mean, it can be I think it's like $44 for a Hario Slim. And that's going to do a consistently better job.
Between good beans, a good grinder, quality water, and good extraction, each has a portion of the pie. Do you think there's one that's more important than the other, or does it take all of them to make good coffee?
Grind.
It's a recipe.
Yeah.
It's a recipe. You can just play around with things and change things and not control variables. But get a scale, get a grinder, get some coffee you enjoy. I would argue well-sourced, lighter roasted coffee so you can actually taste what the coffee's supposed to be. And just stick to a recipe. There's so many. You can go to any number of sites. You can go and get recipes of our site. You can go to, as you mentioned him already, you can go to James Hoffman and get some amazing recipes. You can go to, Maxwell, Connor Dashwood and get loads of recipes. There's loads of people you can go to and get what they would consider as a really good recipe. And as long as you stick to that and you're weighing out your beans and you're grinding them appropriately and you're looking for within a certain time of extraction, you're going to get something that's pretty delicious out. But it's not, I think it gets overcomplicated.
There's no prescription, yeah.
You can way overcomplicate if you want to, and many people do, and many people, that's what they love about coffee, is they can go down that hole. But if you just want to get a really good cup of coffee with no stress, and just have a recipe, get a scale, and a mill grinder, and you're good to go. I don't think it's any more than that. I mean, of course you can refine and make things better and better and better. But, if you just want to have a good cup of coffee, then just stick to a recipe and have a couple of inexpensive tools that allow you to get it.
Apparently there's as many flavors to the human tongue in coffee as there is wine. I don't know if this is true.
Yeah, there's more in the coffee.
Yeah, I can't remember the number. I think it's like 4,000 different attributes. I can't remember the word right now. But significantly more complex. Coffee is significantly more complex than wine.
So have you guys noticed that kind of awakening of coffee the last maybe 10 years and the third wave? Is that?
Yeah, absolutely. When we first moved over here, there was, I'll miss some, I'm sure, but there was Revolver and Parlor and
Phil and Seb.
Oh, well, in Calgary, we had Phil and Seb and Rosso. And so we kind of we knew everyone who was in specialty coffee at one point. It was so small. We all were friends with each other. And, there was maybe 5 people in all of Canada that heard of a Porlex grinder, and we were friends with all of them. It was such a tight group.
That's cool.
And it was really fun, but it's just expanded like crazy.
Would you say that's the third wave of coffee, or is
this whole, I don't know, I think it's a progression, and people like to put things into waves, right? But
exactly.
It's a progression. It's like anything, right? Is that people have definitely become generally across the board. I think populaces are becoming generally more gastronomically aware.
Yeah.
Whether it's food, whether it's wine, whether it's coffee. And we can talk about, the last year probably in a little bit, but there's definitely been a consistent movement. Like there is with anything that's specialist, but it becomes, there's more vocalization, there's more visibility, and I think we've contributed to that in a small way. And as people have the visibility, they want to try new things. It's this progression, and I separate it. I mean, of course, like anything, you can separate it out if you want into various waves, but I don't know what wave would be on that.
Yeah, what are we on now?
But it's a progression, and I think things go back as well. A bit like fashion, that goes back as well at some point. It rotates, it goes around.
Yeah.
So, I think that what we're in now is a significant growth in home brewing, and people wanting to get better coffee at home. And that's been accelerated massively over the past year.
Yeah.
But it was a trend that was ongoing anyway. Part of the success of our business is that, right?
Interesting.
But people want to be able to replicate, especially now they can't go to coffee shops. They're not at work getting coffee. Yeah. Maybe they had, especially in Calgary when there's a lot of corporate offices, they probably had a barista there that worked and made, or there was a coffee shop down in the plus 15 that was doing good stuff. So now they can't get that. They want to do that at home. And I think that's been a massive awakening in people, and a realization that you can do it better. You can have this luxury item, which is, again, much cheaper than it should be. But you can have this luxury item as part of your daily.
It's totally luxury.
Ritual.
Yeah.
When you think about all that goes into it.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
It's way underpriced.
It's amazing.
Massively underpriced.
All the way up here in Canada, you can get this amazing thing sourced from everywhere.
Everywhere. Yeah. So much work put into it. So much infrastructure put into it.
Yeah.
So many people have touched it along the way.
Yeah.
To make it happen.
And this isn't me, but we've just been listening to a podcast that was recommended by a guy we know from England who was a big coffee guy called Maxwell Colin Dashwood, and he recommended the History of Coffee podcast. And when coffee was first big, and when it was primarily driven from Yemen. It was $36 plus a pound. It was $36 plus a pound of green coffee.
Really?
What is it now? Buck?
Marginal.
$1.20?
For sure.
Bit more if you want to spend more and support Origin and go direct. I did always notice when I went to, there are places where it's priced where it should be. Like if you when we go to Japan, it's probably, you get a cappuccino, it's maybe $10.
For sure.
Right? Mm-hmm. Which is probably about where it should be. For a cappuccino. Maybe a bit more. Yeah, but that's probably about where it should be.
Interesting.
But you definitely can't have careers in coffee itself that are sustainable when that's the price of coffee.
Yeah.
I think that's a big challenge. And, Italy has always been pretty good at that because it's a career, right? You can have a career as a barista.
For sure.
But that's cultural.
Have you guys read the story of Howard Schultz Starbucks? I didn't know Pete's and Starbucks were the same.
Yeah.
That, coffee culture has been around for a while, but it just seems like it's kind of permeated the last 10, 20 years.
The whole specialty coffee industry likes to kind of downplay Starbucks, but I think the entire specialty coffee industry has Starbucks to thank.
Yeah. Those Pete's guys were super into it.
Yeah, I mean, and you went to the first Starbucks at the time. It would have been some of the best coffee you could get.
Yeah, exactly.
That's the way it is. And of course, as you become this big company, you have to put controls in place. And you're going to have to cater towards what the most popular tastes are if you want to grow like that, because you're not going to grow it in, truly single origin, beautifully paid for, managed coffees. You're not going to, right? There's just not a big enough market there yet. But, it's definitely there. I mean, you look at companies like Arabica, who started down in Kyoto, and they now have, 60 stores around the globe. Specialty coffee, like higher-end specialty coffee, and they're now at 60 stores.
Yeah.
The most beautiful cafes you'll ever see.
Just stunningly beautiful.
Or Blue Bottle. They did a good cafe route.
Yeah, Blue Bottle as well have done a great job. So there are people, you get people who will argue, well, the coffee isn't as good there as it once was, and I would agree.
Yeah.
I'd agree.
Well,
but you're still talking about what's really good coffee. You're in this range of good coffee. It might not be there.
Yeah.
But I'm going to happily go and get a drink from there.
Yeah. It's amazing they can keep it as consistent as they do, because when you think about how hard it is to keep consistent coffee from all the growers and stuff.
That's and again, I think alluding to your comment around Starbucks. Starbucks were successful for a couple of reasons. The one is consistency. Yeah, if you're going here, or here, or here,
it's
going to be the same. Whether you love it or not, it's going to, you know what you're getting. You know what to expect. And people want to know what they're getting. They want consistency. And, the other is they treated coffee as retail. They have a massively successful retail stream in any cafe of product and whole bean.
Right.
They absolutely transformed the industry, and they facilitated specialty coffee as we know it now to be where it is now. Because remember, you also couldn't charge $5 for a coffee until Starbucks did.
But it's been around. That's what I didn't really understand, is that it's been around for, 60, 70 years when those guys started, and those Pete's guys. Yeah.
Either way, they've been around for a long time. And if you go to which so many people have, because it's a tourist attraction now, but if you go to their first store, it's the only thing that makes it recognizable is the siren, the logo. That's it. You wouldn't necessarily write it as a Starbucks otherwise if it wasn't there.
What makes a good cafe to you guys? You've seen a lot of them.
For me, there's a vibe when you walk in, I love beautiful cafes. I love it when there's a lot of sunlight and plants everywhere, but also there's just when you walk in and the baristas acknowledge you right away and you just feel welcome. You don't feel like you're walking into somewhere where you're not cool enough to be there. You're just like, this is my happy place. Just walk in. And there's that smell and the grinder's going and it's all of your senses at once. And I just love walking into new cafes that I haven't been into before, which is why that's what we do when we go on vacation. We go visit our customers all across Canada or down into the US, and that's what we do because it's just, I love that.
I love all of that, but I think there's, again, you mentioned this, but I think there's a balance between specialty coffee's got a bit of a rap for going in and being pretentious, right? All you have to go is like 10 years ago, and every comedy show would have 10, 15 years ago.
Portland baristas.
The stereotypical barista.
For sure.
And so, and that was the case in a lot of places. There's no pretending. That's what it was, is because it was this elevated product compared to everything else, and maybe it wasn't delivered in the quite the right way, with regards to how it should have been. But that's changed a lot. That's changed a lot. But I think there's a few things. You want to feel like people are engaged in there. You want to feel like people actually care. But it's like any business. You want to feel that people care about what they're doing.
Yeah.
Because as soon as you think they don't care, you're totally disengaged and you want to go somewhere else. So that's the first thing. And how you get there is a much longer conversation. I think the other thing that I love about cafes, which is one of the most frustrating things about this current situation now, is that if there's a communal table in a cafe, I'm going to go and sit at it. One of the main functions of cafes, historically and what is now, should be a place where you can go, meet people, have conversations, meet different people who might not have the same views or beliefs as you, be able to have really good, engaging, friendly conversations and to meet different people from lots of different walks of life. I think that's one of the fundamental functions of a good cafe. You mentioned design. One of the problems I have with a lot of the modernist design is it detracts from that. Now, I love clean lines. I love that look. I do. But if it's not designed so you can interact and have conversations, and I know all over this, I know this is not me saying this for the first time, but all over this cup of coffee, there's this starting point of going into there. That is fundamentally one of my favorite things in the world, is just going into cafes and meeting people and talking to them, which is obviously one of Jen's least favorite things in the world.
Okay.
But for me, that is one of the most fundamental parts of having a cafe, and that's how I value a cafe. I think aesthetically, it needs to be considered. It needs to feel and look good. That doesn't mean it has to be massively expensive to fit out. It doesn't have to be like a $500,000 or $1 million fit out. It just has to look and feel functionally good. And then it's got to have a good atmosphere, and it's got to be designed, and that's driven by the owners or the baristas. It's got to be approachable, and then you've got to have space to be able to interact in some form. It's got to be designed to encourage interaction.
It's probably why we both we haven't been able to go to many new cafes, obviously, in the last year because we can't travel, but the new Phil and Sebastian in Bridgeland ticks both of our boxes, doesn't it?
Yeah.
It's like you
Shout
walk
out to Phil and
in
Sebastian.
Yeah.
They had this
Love
Phil
those
on the
guys.
podcast.
Yeah.
Really nice guy.
But if you haven't been, you should check out the new
It's
location.
fantastic.
Oh, for sure.
Yeah, it's beautiful foliage everywhere, beautiful furniture, the chairs are gorgeous. You walk in, you're greeted right away, approachable, friendly staff, communal tables. It's a great example of all of those things.
Yeah.
They do a great job.
I don't like lazy design. So when it's a struggle to get around somewhere, or when it's not, there isn't a journey planned out. When people don't consider the customer journey, as much as considering how the space works as a workspace for the employees, when people don't think about the customer journey and how someone moves through and the experience they'll have, I think it's lazy. I think it's a cop-out. I think you've got to, and that's in any retail.
Leaving money on the table too.
Well, yeah. Absolutely. And so, I'm really interested in design from the customer journey perspective. I'm really interested from a form. I want it to look beautiful and feel like a great place to be. But yeah, definitely there's, when you forgo thinking about all these things, you're setting yourself up for failure as a cafe.
You guys seen a lot of cafes. It's a tough business. How many do you think actually make it and are successful? Maybe 10%? 5%?
I don't know percentage-wise. I can say that, this industry has grown so much over the last 10 years, and we keep tight tabs on our wholesale accounts and who's doing what and who's growing and who's buying more this year than they were last year. We don't see, thankfully, we touch wood, don't see a lot of cafe closures. It does happen.
Really?
But rarely.
It's not.
Really?
It's not that.
Seems like I always see turnover, but maybe not.
Yeah, not in specialty. Not in specialty.
You guys
coffee.
would know, yeah.
And you know what? Here's the other thing is that I think the question of turnover of cafes, I think is maybe not the right question. Honestly, I think it's more about who's successful and who's spinning the wheels.
Yeah.
And that's the same, not just in coffee, that's any business. Right? There's
That's true.
so many businesses. And
So
you'll
true.
have lots of people who are they're turning the wheels.
Yeah.
They're turning the wheels and they get by and they move forward. I think the more interesting question is who goes from turning their wheels
to
expanding and significantly growing their business.
Yeah, like those Blue Bottle guys. Like why?
Yeah, it's just a lot of, I think it's a lot of investment, a lot of process.
And a lot of right place, right time as well.
Yeah.
Seizing an opportunity. So there's so many different factors, but I think, the more interesting thing is, I think you can keep a business going for a long time if you're belligerent enough and you don't want to say, well, that's enough.
For sure.
Yeah. And there's a lot of that. There's a lot of people who, like us, we're living the corporate life, say, I love going to this cafe every day. Wow, my dream is to own a cafe.
Exactly.
And for some people, that works out just great. I mean, like Bill and Seb, they were engineers. They left. They're being the badasses of the coffee world now. Like, they made a huge change and it worked out well for them. But there's a lot of people that are now, stuck behind the bar, having to come in when one of their employees calls in sick and just, paying the bills and turning the wheels. And it's kind of the same thing day in, day out. We see a lot of that, and it's relentless and it's tough.
Yeah.
And it's not, people see the price of a cup of coffee and think, wow, there's a lot of money to be made in this. And no, there's not. There's
not if you do it
so much
properly.
that goes into that. Yeah.
If you want to do really good coffee, it's not cheap. Unfortunately, you've got to sell the product for relatively cheap. It's a fixed price. You can't really go much. You can try, but you're not really going much outside of that, right?
It's tough.
So. And there are successes. I mean, I was just trying to think. I mean, if we just look at Calgary, because we're here, but Monogram has grown into multiple locations, and Rosso has done a great job of that. But I think then it's, we have a segment of what goes on this. We know what they're buying. But, I guess you can still turn the wheels at 6 cafes as you can with 1 cafe if you're not getting sustainable growth. I don't, But it's, but there are definitely people who you can see have grown their business well and done a really good job. And I think Calgary is pretty unique in the fact for a city of this size that it has, probably 4 specialty chains.
Yeah.
That have done a really good job, and it's sustained, right? That you can sustain that in a city of 1.3 million people, whatever it is now.
Interesting.
That's really not bad.
Yeah.
I can't think of any other cities this side that have this size who have that many specialty chains, like small specialty chains that are successful.
Interesting.
It's a pretty unique place.
Yeah.
It doesn't get talked about a lot though. It's just, it's,
we're lucky here.
The ones that are successful, why do you think they're successful? Is it passion? Is it business sense?
It's business sense.
Brains.
I mean, passion comes into it, no doubt.
Right.
But we know lots of passionate people who have maybe fit into that category of
don't have business sense.
Spinning the wheels.
Yeah.
It's wanting to have aggressive growth, I think, or
planning for it.
Planning for it, seeing the volumes of scale and seeing those opportunities where you can save money and just grow aggressively. You need to be able to actively do that. If you're behind the bar making coffee every day, covering for your sick part-time barista, you can't put that time in.
And to what I said to start, we're not perfect. We're still trying us to step out of the business. So
it's hard.
One of the reasons that a cafe wasn't right for us is we knew that would be part of.
For sure.
That would be part of it.
It's tough.
We were very aware of the difficulty and, with a 3-month-old kid having to be called in to cover a shift because someone hasn't turned up, and on top of all the shifts you're having to work anyway to start with when you start a cafe because you're going to be the primary person working there. It isn't easy. I have a lot of respect for anyone who does it, and I have even more respect for people who actually can make a success of it because it's not easy.
It's hard.
But I do think an understanding of something outside of coffee is good, but also you also need that passion. And so again, Phil and Sebastian, really big into coffee. But also, that's not always what they've done.
Yeah.
Right. So they had wider perspective.
Yeah.
And the same would be of Rosso, and the same would be of Monogram. I mean, that they were all alumni of Phil and Sebastian, right? Yeah. And so learned from really good teachers.
Yeah.
It's something I have a lot of respect for people because firstly, it's hard, and secondly, those are the places I love going to.
Yeah. It is hard. I think the rumors that Kicking Horse, they love the cafe, but their focus has never been the cafe for those reasons.
Yeah. their money
It's
is
tough.
in wholesale.
Well, they're a business
Yeah.
that happens to have a cafe.
Yeah.
That's
That's the reality
yeah.
of it, right? It's their showroom for their coffees.
Exactly.
Because it's scale. You need scale.
Right.
And that's, you mentioned, again, Blue Bottle. The reason that they have massive investment and they could scale. And when you can scale, then you can start doing things that other people can't. Mm-hmm. And then when you get brand recognition, one of the biggest moves in the past few years has been up the RTD, the ready to drink category. And so, Stumptown was bought because of that.
Interesting.
Because of their RTD infrastructure. And then, Blue Bottle have a significant RTD as well. And you don't see it as much in Canada, but you go to the US or Japan and there's, these high visibility specialty brands, the shelves are full of those drinks.
Ready to drink coffee in a can.
Interesting.
It's very lucrative if you could find the right market for
It's scale, right? You're moving into the masses rather than just this niche.
So many advantages when you get scale.
Yeah.
What makes a bad cafe?
I'm going to rescue. It's the inverse of what we've just said.
Anxiety.
I mean, there's nothing more to say about than the inverse of just what we said.
Yeah.
If you have disengaged staff, you have people who don't care.
Dark, dirty.
Dark, dirty.
You can tell the
smelly.
coffee grinder hasn't been cleaned because it's all oily and it smells as soon as you walk in the door. They're not cleaning their equipment. They just don't care.
Don't care.
Don't care or don't know enough of how to care, so haven't done their research and just think it's easy.
Interesting.
Or, worst cafe experience I've ever had, will not name names.
Yeah, let's not name names.
California last 2019. Big lineup out the door, hipsters waiting to get their morning coffee. And we waited 45 minutes for our pour over from a barista who was on her phone texting most of the time. The whole time, we were in there with our kids and everyone was looking at us with disdain. Like, what are you doing in here? You're not cool enough to be in here.
Yeah.
And the coffee
and I was wearing
so
my best
bad.
hipster clothes and everything.
Yeah, we were trying. And
you're trying to pay for your
that
coffee.
coffee was the most disgusting, undrinkable coffee. But just the arrogance of being in there and being in this place that we were supposed to think it was better than us. And we weren't worthy. And it was awful. There was no eye contact. There was no chat. There's no one wanted to talk to us. No one asked us how our day was. It was just awful. But there was a lineup out the door, so.
Interesting. Yeah. Good books. Do you guys read much on entrepreneurship or coffee? Would you have any recommendations in that sense?
Yeah, you read more about coffee. I read more about business stuff, I guess.
The E-Myth, Michael Gerber, it sounds like you guys have read that.
Read that last year. That sort of spurred us into putting a lot of processes in place that we didn't already have documented. They're all in someone's head.
Yeah, scaling up with...
Scaling up has been really useful. That's a really good one. Rocket Fuel. Rocket Fuel is part of the EOS system, which is like the entrepreneurial operating system. And it was kind of, I joke to everyone that it was like a biography of Wes and I, because it's all about the visionary and the integrator and how in order to have rocket fuel in your business, you need to have the visionary and the integrator, which is what I was saying before, which we've always said is like jazz hands and spreadsheet. And a lot of, we look to a lot of the companies that we admire and people who are doing really well. And it's the same thing. It's one person who's out there talking and selling the vision of the company and the other person that's behind the laptop making it all happen. So it's, that really was an interesting read and then gave us a lot of kind of ideas to go from there. And yeah, there's a lot of really, my favorite podcast / blog / author is Scott Galloway, who's professor at NYU, business professor, and his books are just,
he's great.
So yeah, his podcasts are great to listen to, but he talks a lot about the four, just Facebook, Amazon, Google, Apple, and all the things that they're doing. He's just come out with a book called Post-Corona, which is talking about what he predicts all of these companies will do after coronavirus is over, and kind of just talking about, it's fascinating the way he looks at these things. He's looking at these trillion-dollar companies, and they need to keep growing their share price and satisfying shareholders, so they need to keep the pace of growth that they've had. But there's no more industries left to gobble up. They're looking, I can't remember the exact numbers, but he was looking at the growth that they had in the first 2 months of the pandemic was equivalent to the entire value of Disney. So when you're growing at that level, what is there left to gobble up? And the only 2 industries left in America that will give them the growth they need is healthcare and education. So he's talking about how he thinks they're going to start going after those two industries, and it's interesting stuff. He's a really thoughtful guy, and his writing is hilarious.
But what it does do as well, I think, is that it just occasionally, when you're going through this, it's not always applicable. It's interesting, but you'll find little things that are just like,
like, oh yeah,
well, we should maybe try this.
Start doing that.
This,
yeah, at a much smaller scale.
At a much smaller scale. Yeah. Coffee books wise, I mean, there's not that, like, there's this basic collection of coffee books, and then after that, there isn't much.
I think my favorite one is Colin Harmon's.
Yeah, Colin's book is really good.
So long I can't remember the name. What I Wish I Knew About Coffee Shops. The red Colin Harmon book.
Okay. But people love
good.
that book. It's just such actionable content. You know, you read a lot of books and it's a lot of theoretical stuff, but it's just all actionable. Colin is an amazing writer, and he is just insightful. Like, really insightful.
If you read his book, you will never again in your life flush a toilet in a public place without thinking about him. Just read it and you'll have to find out why.
And then I think there are other books that are really worth reading depending on what you're into. But I think Water for Coffee is a really interesting book to read, and it's about what water you need to get the best out of your coffee. And
it's a very in-depth book.
If you easily fall asleep.
You have to really want to know.
But if you really want to know, it's a super interesting book, and it's really well researched. That's really good. And then again, it depends who for. If you just want a really good intro to coffee, then That Is the Coffee, which James Hoffman wrote, is just really good for anyone who wants to really learn more. And then a lot of the others just like stories about coffee, or there's
God in a Cup.
Some brew
really
methods
like God
ones.
In a Cup.
There's I don't know that there's a couple of books that I want to get, some history of coffee books, which I haven't read yet, and that's by one of the same guys. I can't remember his name, but he's a professor who does that history of coffee podcast, which I mentioned. But there's a book that he wrote about the history of coffee, and I really want to read that after listening to this podcast. It's a really in-depth history and just stuff that I never knew. Never knew. Like, it had no understanding and impression of. So it's I'll make sure I give you the details later.
Throughout the pandemic, have you guys seen opportunities arise, or how has that been for you guys? Cafes are all closed right now, so how has that been?
I think for the cafes, they've done really well when they've pivoted online. I shouldn't say the word pivot. That's like the new word.
Yeah, buzzword.
Isn't it? But they've changed their model so that they are selling much more online. They're selling retail coffee online. They're selling equipment from us online. They're being where their customer now wants them to be, and they've seen success with that. We definitely saw a huge dip in sales in the first few weeks after all the initial lockdowns started, March of last year. It was definitely a scary time. We weren't sure if, where no one did. No one knew what was going to happen. We weren't sure if we were going to have to do layoffs. We kind of prepared our staff that might be coming. We didn't know. And luckily a few weeks into it, things started to come back up again. And
really?
I think the big change was when the government subsidies started coming. So people knew that, okay, I can't work right now, but I know that my employer is going to be able to give me a portion of my wages and I can just stay home.
Keep the money
That's
going.
when it changed everything, because then people started buying home brewing coffee equipment, and
people who had jobs had more disposable income than ever because they weren't going out. They couldn't go on vacation. So consequently, there's a range of retail items and businesses that we just prime. We were fortunate to be one of those. We could have been shut down as part of the restrictions.
So fickle.
Yeah, it's unfair in many ways.
Totally.
It really is. And we were fortunate. We've worked hard on the business. We've done a lot, but we've also...
No one could have predicted where you needed to be.
Right,
yeah,
we've been
we were lucky.
And so there was definitely, I think, from the sales point, I sort of noticed these three tranches of sales. The one was, straight afterwards everything dropped. Like everything just boom. I can't remember, was it March 19 or so? I can't remember what it was.
Yeah.
But everything
a year
just
ago.
boom, dropped off.
Yeah.
And then we were like, oh, what's going to go on? And like everyone else, was stressed, panicked. But we tried to plan best we could around it. But then we had suddenly I think probably the retail kicked in first, right? Retail just shot up. Yeah. And I'm talking like, 700-800% at the time.
Wow. Yeah. Really?
Yeah. Massive. And so we knew when that happened, we'd be okay. It'd be touch and go, but we'd be okay. And then wholesale, first tranche that sort of came in was the people who were already online and were our customers.
Yeah.
They already had infrastructure. And so they were seeing the same type of success that we were with our direct customer sales. Mm-hmm. And so they were actually, their orders were just shooting up in the air.
Yeah.
And then you had the people who, as soon as it happened, they'd started getting online. The second tranche was these people, when all this happened, they were like, okay, so we've got to develop our strategy around home deliveries, pickups, and our online presence to do that. So then that kicked in and we had this other kick up. And then finally we had this tranche of people who had stuck their head in the sand, hoping things would go away for the first 6-8 weeks, which a lot of people thought it would at the time. And then gone, oh no, this isn't gonna, we've got to do something. And then they started to get their infrastructure in place, and we saw those people coming back up as well. And since then we've been fortunate. Like it's
been a big year.
We've had a really big year.
Yeah.
Very cool.
On top of what we're fortunate and have good growth every year anyway, but it was just
been super fortunate.
Which has provided its own challenges. Like it's really provided its own challenges.
Absolutely.
Yeah. So we can't get stock. I mean, all of this growth has happened amongst the fact that almost all of our major suppliers cannot produce enough right now. They cannot find space on container ships to put a container. We'll place an order. As an order we placed in October. We should have had 5 containers by now from this company. We placed it in October and it was finally ready in
4th of this month.
No, it was finally ready, but then they couldn't get it onto a ship.
Oh yeah.
And all the logistics companies, it's such a racket. They're saying if you want to be guaranteed to have the container space on this ship, it's $10,000.
Shakedown.
Yeah, that's shakedown. So
that's tough.
So it's been delay after delay after delay, manufacturing delays, shipping delays. Look through our site, it seems like half the stuff's out of stock.
And yet we're still struggling to keep up with shipping. Like to get things out the door because the orders are so
right.
As much as we do, as much as we add infrastructure, as much as we add.
That's a rare story, I think, right now. For non-tech business, I don't know how many, I
don't know. I think there's a range. Unfortunately, I think no business have done sort of median during this period.
Yeah.
People have either
for sure
been backs to the wall, totally screwed.
Yes.
And struggling, or
your Amazon or Shopify.
Yeah.
Like there's no one going, it's fine. It's taking along. Yeah. Like it's not like that. And I think it's separated out what businesses frankly will be successful moving into the future. It's just accelerated it massively. Yeah. Or what styles of businesses I think is probably fair. What styles of businesses.
Right.
Yeah. We were really lucky, fortunate to begin with that we're pretty much all online. Most of our business is wholesale, but we've set it up like as if it is retail. All of our customers come onto our wholesale website and place an order and add it to cart and all of that. And it comes straight into the warehouse and gets packed and shipped out. So we were so ready for all of that without knowing we needed to be. We were really in the right place. We weren't, the kind of wholesale companies, some that we deal with, where they're taking orders over the phone and writing them down. And someone will get back to you in a week with the price. They've got to be struggling right now.
But also, it's probably worth noting, as you talked about the equipment versus the copy and the hardware versus the software. What we did at the start of the pandemic is we started bringing in coffees from people because we knew we were okay. We knew we were okay, but we knew the roasters that we knew would be really struggling.
Yeah.
And so we started bringing in their coffee on consignment and just
selling it
for them. We weren't taking anything from it. It was just selling it for them. A year in now, we've sort of, it's become normalized. So we've moved things to sort of a wholesale model on all of our coffees, and it's become opportunity. It's become a really good opportunity because we sell a significant amount of coffee.
Nice compliment to the hardware.
Yeah. I think we had always sort of thought about selling coffee beans on our site, but there was a lot of reasons not to, like expiry dates and competing with our customers and how do we pick which ones we sell and which ones we don't because there's so many. But that sort of forced us to, because when we thought, what can we do to help our customers, our wholesale customers? What can we do to help them? The only thing, like the best thing we could think of
Was to become their
just become their customers and help them sell their product. And there was a lot of like little small town roasters that emailed us and said, thank you so much. This has made such a difference. This is going to help us get through. So that was awesome to be able to help like that. And I think it gave our staff a lot of morale during a really scary time of like, here's something we can tangibly do to help. So it was really good. And yeah, now it's turned into an actual channel.
That's cool.
Revenue stream for us.
Well, that's a great conversation. I won't keep you guys much longer.
Thank you. That was fun.
That's fun. Thanks so much.
I'll leave advice to other entrepreneurs, maybe just starting out.
Hire earlier than you
You've
think
just taken it off me. That is the most important one.
You can't grow your business if you're the one having to fight fires all day.
And you constantly push it back, right? Because it's always like, well, that's going to cost me a lot of money to hire somebody. But I'm
going to have to teach them how to do the stuff I do, so that takes a long time, and I might as well just do it myself. As soon as you say I might as well just do it yourself, you shouldn't be doing it yourself. And this is my advice, but I mean, we're 10 years in and I'm still resetting people's passwords for them.
Yeah.
And when I should be.
Which we do have a plan in place to get out of that. Just want to be clear.
It is a constant struggle.
You know, the problem, one of the big problems is we've constantly been in growth. There hasn't been a year when we haven't been in growth. And so it's hard to address that, but we're forcefully addressing this now.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yeah. But hire as soon as you think you might need somebody. Don't put it off. Because you can't grow your company while you're shuffling around doing all the little things. You just can't.
And the argument is, it's going to cost me this much money, but the time you free up to then put into the business just pays back. Yeah. I don't think there's been a single time when it maybe one, two people out of everyone we've hired since we started, when it hasn't paid back multiple fold.
Yeah.
That's awesome. Thank you guys.
Thank you.
Really appreciate it. We'll wrap it up there. Hey, thanks for listening, everyone. Hopefully you enjoyed the episode. If you liked what you heard, check out rosebros.ca, where we will have upcoming shows. You can also find our coffee and chocolate there, where we plant one tree for every bag or bar sold through our partnership with One Tree Planted, a cool not-for-profit organization focused on global reforestation. Until next time, happy coffee drinking.